That 12-foot climb up and down the inside of a B-25 never gets old to me. I guess because of the thousands of aircrew who made history doing that very same thing during World War II. North American aviation named this most famous of the medium bombers after air power pioneer Billy Mitchell. No question it was an inspired choice. The B-25 gained immortality for serving Jimmy Doolittle's Tokyo Raiders when they flew off the USS Hornet on April 18, 1942. To fly 16 medium bombers off a rolling pitching deck was a heroic task. And it brought the one bright ray of hope to an American people in the midst of defeat. Pilot Ted Lawson's vivid recollections became legendary through his book and the subsequent movie, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. Getting his B-25, the ruptured duck, off the Hornet was close to miraculous.
After 30 blood, sweat, and seconds, the Navy man was satisfied with the sound of my engines. Our wheel blocks were jerked out, and when I released the brakes, we quivered forward, the wind grabbing at our wings. We rambled dangerously close to the edge. The Hornet's deck bucked wildly. A sheet of spray rushed back at us. I never felt the takeoff. One moment, the end of the Hornet's flight deck was rushing up at us. The next split second, I glanced down at what had been a white line, and it was water. As others took off behind me, I pulled out in front of the great ship that had done its best to plant us in Japan's front yard. I banked now, gaining a little altitude, and instinctively reached down to pull up the flaps. With a start, I realized they weren't down. I had taken off without them.
The B-25's design was a perfect blend for low-level and medium bombing, as well as strafing. Serving in all theaters, the Mitchell was one of 4 aircraft, in addition to the P-38, B-24, and C-47, which 5th Air Force General George Kenney said made the difference in paving the way to victory in the Pacific. It could lay down a stick of bombs and take quite a bit of battle damage in the process. And its inherent lack of bad characteristics allowed pilots to skim through enemy flak right on the deck without fear of losing control or getting outside their capabilities. I think I understand why it successfully performed so many different missions. From beginning to end, this is a pilot's airplane without a single vice. An 18-year-old with 200 hours flying time could master it in a few hours, then concentrate on combat training. Though it's heavy on the controls, the 25 will go exactly where the pilot points it, and you can make near-perfect landings. Let's climb up into the cockpit, and we'll start the pre-flight. As with every North American aviation product I've flown, the cockpit is simple. It's laid out with a pilot in mind. Everything's easy to reach, and as you'll see, uncomplicated. In combat, this was a godsend. It allowed pilots to concentrate on their mission instead of trying to fly the airplane. Even so, the pilot's handbook remains the key to pucker-free flying. As with all the other ex-military aircraft now flying, the handbook has to be virtually memorized. This handbook will take you a little longer to master than, say, for a fighter. There are more emergency procedures and systems. The only way to get to the outside for the pre-flight on fuel and oil is to take this hatch off. So you pull it, get it off, and then very carefully lower it into the cockpit. It weighs quite a bit, and you want to be careful that as you lower it in, you don't get your head caught or anything else, or catch instruments or switches, because it can really do a number on you. Once I'm on top of the wing, I want to check fuel and oil levels. The oil sits under this large fairing door. You pull up the oil dipstick, and it's just like your car, except we're checking 30 gallons of oil, not 30 gallons of fuel. So this holds more than your car in fuel, but in oil. It says just short of 30 gallons. That's what we want. Check that for each side. Resecure the door, and then check all 3 fuel caps for fuel level. There's an auxiliary fuel cell out here, 2 inboard fuel cells, which hold the main portion of the fuel. Usually we have a dipstick to check that. External condition of the aircraft on top, then we're back in. Behind the pilot's seats sits the heart of the airplane, hydraulically, electrically, and emergency system-wise. You want to check the circuit breakers. They're all in, everything's standard. The emergency hydraulics sit between the pilot seats on a pedestal along with the emergency air brakes. Should that system fail, you want to check those. The hydraulic reservoir is behind the top turret. That's what this is. This is where the top turret gunner sat with 250 caliber machine guns. There's a visual port in the hydraulic reservoir. You can check the level of the hydraulic fluid. You want to check for the emergency cranks for lowering the gear and the flaps manually. It's just a big crank that you crank. One is on one side of the bomb bay and one is in the back section of the airplane. But you check those, make sure they're okay. Then there is a safety clip for the bomb bay doors and the emergency release for the hatch, entrance hatch, in case you have to get out of the airplane. You just pull this thing and the hatch falls off. So all these are areas you can check quite quickly right here in the middle of the airplane. Again, it's the simplicity of North Americans' design genius that makes the airplane so wonderful to pre-flight and to fly. This is the bomb bay. Depending on the model, a Mitchell could carry over 6,000 pounds of bombs in here. Combined with a 50 caliber machine gun nose, this was a lethal punch that made groups like the Air Apaches famous in the South Pacific. Army Air Force's B-25 pilots were a special breed, known for their daring, particularly at low altitude.
Leading the group on a morning mission never gets any easier. The boys didn't sleep much last night. Of course, they never do before a mission. You spend the whole night staring up in your bunk, wondering what the fates have in store for you. Sooner or later, we always end up losing some of our best. Billy's the only one that seems to keep his mind on the business at hand, checking his charts and worrying if he got us off course. Really gets to him. John, our turret gunner, gazes at his wife's picture for hours, wondering if he'll ever see that little daughter of his. She was born after we left the States. And the letters. Good things she writes back. Sitting up there on top of the ship can get pretty nerve-wracking, able to see enemy fighters coming in from all directions. Of course, he can shoot back, and he's good with those 50s. Oh, Sam, he's got to have the loneliest position of all, but he doesn't complain. We've all been awake for over 3 hours now. Pre-flight's done, she's gassed up. Wonder how the guys are doing. Thank God we have a great ground crew. Those guys really take care of us. Our B-25 is the best in the group. Of course, every crew believes that about their ship or they'd stay in the ground. Briefing this morning sure got a laugh when the intelligence officer got up to address the men and someone in the back murmured, "I don't know how many men you've got here, but I do know they're a bunch of scared boys." Billy's got to be feeling a little edgy by now, but you'd never know it by the look on his face. What a kid. He's a pretty good navigator for someone who's only 18. You never get used to these bombing runs, but being on the giving end has to be better than on the receiving end. Any run was made as low as we could get, preferably getting our propeller tips green from cutting grass, which isn't as much of a lie as it sounds, because the Defender had a big problem hitting a target moving at about 300 miles per hour at very low level. Most ground defense was done by having gunners go under cover, aim the barrel straight up, and hold the trigger open. The effect was like trying to fly through a fire hose without getting wet. As the saying goes, there ain't no way, and we got holes. Very exciting, but not conducive to a healthy old age.
A major part of the pre-flight is checking the B-25's Curtiss-Wright engines. Twin-row, radial, 2,600 cubic inches, developing 1,700 horsepower. A big, powerful engine one on each side. Check the propellers, 12-foot 7-inch diameter on these Hamilton standards, general condition, and we're just about ready to go. Rick Korf owns and operates this B-25J on behalf of the National Warplane Museum in Geneseo, New York. Today, Captain Bill Dodds and I will be flying the airplane together. Bill is a 747 captain for Federal Express, formerly with Flying Tigers Airlines. Bill, you've had a lot of experience flying not only the B-25, but the B-17 and so many other airplanes. How many do you fly, and what does it take to get that kind of experience?
Well, I really fly everything, you might say, but the FAA has designated me as an examiner because of my past experience in these type of aircraft. I presently do 8 type ratings, along with letters of authorizations for some of the jets, some of the high-performance piston-powered airplanes.
You get pilot fatigue often?
No, I don't. I just have so much fun doing this. It's a pleasure to fly these World War II airplanes and to train people and also keep them up with their proficiency, because these airplanes, the pilots have to be refreshed quite frequently.
This is something you do on a regular basis?
As a regular basis, I like to refer to as my part-time job. I fly that 747. This is my fun job.
Okay. Well, Bill, we've done the pre-flight. Airplane looks like it's ready to go. Why don't we climb aboard and go flying?
That sounds great to me. Let's go have some fun.
Let's do it.
Okay, engine start checklist. Fire guard, we've got it posted outside. On the right. Okay, left. Props are clear on the right. Clear on the left. Master ignition switch is on. Okay, we'll start the right engine. Okay. We'll put the fuel boost pump to low. Fuel boost watch the pressure. Should be between 8 and 10 pounds. Okay, it's up. Okay, go to high. And it goes up to about 16, 17. Okay, 17, 21. Okay, ready on the right. Ready on the right. Are we clear? Clear right. Okay, we'll let you handle the mixture. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Mags on and priming. Hydraulic pressure checks, right engine pump. Okay, looking good. Are we ready? Stand by left engine. All right. Boost pump to low. Boost pump to low. Got pressure 8 pounds. Okay, up to high. Got pressure 18 pounds. Okay. Ready on the left. Here we go. Clear left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On and priming. Okay, your main inverter is coming on. All right. It's on, indicating. Flaps at 1/4. Okay, flaps at 1/4. Okay, all clear, ready to taxi. What we have to be cautious about is taxiing so we don't get this nose wheel turned around. What happens if you get that nose wheel cocked too far, Bill? Well, you could get it completely 180-degree turn around, and then you could break it off. Will it really do that? Oh, yes, it'll do it. Snap it off just like a matchstick. That's one of the reasons why they put these 2 lights up here, let you know that the nose gear is 15 degrees out of center, or off center, and so if one light comes on, it'll go out again when that nose wheel goes all around. It doesn't happen too much, but where it happens is like you're on wet grass, you know, right after it rains, because it's slick, and there's no feeling to it, and you start turning the airplane real sharp and trying to jockey it around, and all of a sudden it comes around, and you won't even know it, and then you feel, well, I'll blast a little power, and next thing you know, snap it sitting on its nose. Brother, I wasn't aware of that. Yes. Now, also, these brakes are really powerful. The first time I flew this thing, I thought if I can learn to taxi this, I could fly it. Well, that's what they say, because you have no nose wheel steering in it, and you have to use differential power and differential brakes, and it's a technique. It's sort of like playing a piano. remember the first time I tried to taxi this thing, I got this waddle going, and it would waddle to one side and waddle to the other, and I got this pilot-induced oscillation problem.
It's called the Baghdad dance.
Well, boy, it was the Baghdad dance, and I couldn't seem to get out of the Baghdad dance. It was a real nightmare. You know, it just got worse and worse. And finally, I realized that the pressures on the brake are just almost, you have to think about it, then you let off on it. Engine temperatures are all within limit, so we can do our run-up. Okay. So we'll take them up to 1,700 RPM. The airplane's been run, so one time is good enough for exercise. All right, good. What we'll do is do a feathering check now. Hit the feathering button. We'll check the generator ammeters here to see if we have a load that means the feathering pump is working. And we'll watch for a drop of a couple hundred RPM. Okay. Here comes the right feather button. Right feather button. On. I got a load, and I got an RPM drop off. Okay, it's unloaded. All right. Right one. Left feather check. Okay, that's the left one coming. Okay, here we go. Load. I got a drop. Unload. Okay, now we'll do an exercise the prop levers one more time when it comes back up there to 1,700. Make sure that it's governing. Both are governing. Okay, she's burned like a kitten. Before takeoff checklist. Okay, before takeoff checklist. All engine instruments are in the green. Normal. Fuel quantity is checked. We have full tanks, 975 gallons on board. Okay. The aux fuel transfer switches are off. The boost pumps are going to go to low first. Low, and then high. Then high. Mixtures are going to full rich again. Full rich. Carburetor air filter switch is in normal. Superchargers are in low. All doors and hatches on the right here, and they were closed in the back. Roger. We'll do the crew briefing. Okay, crew briefing basically, Bill. If we lose anything on takeoff, I'll identify the problem. I'd like you to confirm what I've seen. If it's not a confirm, override, overrule, explain. And if you feel you need to take over because it's really a bad mistake, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll go ahead if you confirm, pull the power back to confirm, and then feather. We're all set. Ready to go. Checklist is complete. Okay, 30 inches. Here we go. In the green. There's 50, 60, 70. I'm going to make the nose wheel light. So airborne. Positive rate of climb. Positive rate. Gear up. Gear coming up. We're looking for 145. Gears up. Okay, there's 145. Here comes flying power. Flying power. Stand by the flaps. Okay, flaps up. Flaps coming up. She's climbing good, looking good. Oh, she's lovely. Looking good. I'll make a left turn out. Temperatures and pressures are all good. Okay, you can turn the boost pumps off one at a time. One at a time. We got pressure on the left engine. Yeah, Jeff, you know, this is such a great airplane. Can you imagine the Doolittle Raiders when they left the carrier on that mission to Tokyo? Well, the incredible thing was they took off a full flap, and they left the deck in less than 400 feet. Okay, I'm going to tuck her in here, Bill. Okay. Just for some good close formation. Well, we're sitting here saving a little fuel. Normally, you know, this thing will burn 150 gallons an hour in cruise. You know, it's quite a gas hog, so to speak, and somewhere around 250 a gallon. Gets a little expensive to run this machine. Well, it really does. That's the whole thing. It gets to be a real wartime expense for a civilian. Well, it costs, when you consider maintenance and everything, insurance, the fuel, about $1,000 to $1,500 an hour just to run this. Boy. And of course it doesn't go very fast, or it doesn't go really very far either. Yeah, the control pressures in this airplane are quite heavy anyway. And you know, in the airshow environment, you got to be a little bit careful on what you do in this airplane, because you can get it in a pretty nasty position. Yeah, and it's very stiff. The problem with the control pressures are they're, what would you say, 50 to 75 pounds, Bill, easy? Oh, very easy. Hey, Bill, how many inches can I have here? 30 if I take them up to 24. I'll open up all bays. Okay. I got all the traffic in sight. Roger.
The B-25 was so rugged that pilots waded into some of the most horrifying flak ever shot at airplanes. And quite often they picked it up like a magnet.
I called back to the gunner to ask if he could see any damage, as the plane was extremely sloppy on her controls. He said, "Jesus Christ, Lieutenant, the whole right tail section and rudder's gone. The waist gun was blown right out through the side of the ship, and we're full of holes. Are we gonna ditch?" I told him, hell no, I can't swim that far. As we neared home base in Lingayen, several planes came up to look us over, as a flight which was babysitting us had radioed ahead. We were expected, and as the strip appeared, we could see that we had quite an audience waiting to see what would happen. I figured we might as well give them a close look, and after firing a couple of red flares for an ambulance pickup, flew a couple of miles down the beach, slowly turned, eased down to a couple of 100 feet, and buzzed the strip. I got a dressing down from the base commander for that. But what the hell? It didn't seem right not to prove it could fly. So far, so good. Now all we had to do was land. It was a certainty I couldn't slow down to use flaps because I couldn't keep the nose up. So I flew about 5 miles down the beach again, eased around, and still holding 200 feet and 180 miles an hour, lined up on the runway, crossed my fingers, and dropped the wheels, wondering what she'd do. It worked out fine, except I had to pull full stick back in my lap just to fight the wheel drag, and add more throttle to keep the nose up so I'd be able to fly her straight onto the ground. No go-around. Had to be right the first time. By juggling the throttles, the ground level approach looked okay, and just before we touched, I hit full throttle, which got the nose up enough for the main gear to hit first, snapped off power, shut idle cutoff to windmill the props to slow down, and slid to a stop with no runway left. I taxied back, got out and looked, and damn near crapped. My gunner was right. No stabilizer and no rudder on the right side. If I'd known that for real, I'd probably have crashed. Any fool knows that a B-25 just won't fly in that condition.
in losing an engine, Bill, the airplane has pretty good single-engine performance at the weights we have today. So the VMC of 145 is actually a very safe number.
Oh yeah, it's a very, very safe number. It's a number you really want to try to hang on to if you really do lose an engine, because you know we're not test pilots anymore.
Yeah.
And it's nice that we believe the numbers, so we can get the performance out of the airplane, and we have a little reserve. It's like, you know, playing poker out west. The guy that had 5 aces, sometimes he won.
You know, one thing that's interesting in the manual is the single-engine procedures. Number 1 is drop the bombs. Number 2 is drop the bomb bay tank.
Yep.
Number 3 is identify the bad engine.
Yep.
It's an amazing for a modern-day pilot who's not used to carrying those kinds of droppable gross weights. It really is an education to read that manual that those guys had to put up with in World War II.
Yeah, to think of it also as the people in World War II had 300-400 hours of flying time. And these guys, you know, they had excellent training. I mean, the excellent training that the services provided in World War II for the limited amount of experience that these pilots had flying these things in combat was tremendous. And being able to think and react to the emergencies because you went on to combat and you came back with a lot of things not working too good.
Exactly. And this is a genius of a design. You know, one of the things, Bill, about the B-25 is that a 200-hour pilot could really fly one of these.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, it just wasn't a great problem for him to master.
And then you got to thank the old engineers that designed safety into this airplane just for bringing these kids back from combat.
Okay, Bill, let's go back in and land.
Okay, very good. I'll get our approach checklist done here.
Fuel quantity, we got plenty of fuel. Roger. Aux transfer switches are off. The mixtures are going rich. Okay. And the carburetor lever is as required. Everything is just fine. You know, when you descend in this airplane, don't forget you want to bring the manifold pressure back to no less than what the RPM is, because we don't want any super cooling, and we don't want the propellers driving the engine. We want the engine driving the propellers. So we want to treat her like a crate of eggs because she's a sweet old lady. And she sure is.
I tell you, sure is a lot of fun to keep these round engines running.
Well, they run so well when they're taken care of. There's no question about that.
Now, you know, it's a shame that a lot of kids today in aviation don't get a chance to fly round-motored airplanes.
Yeah, it is.
You know, everything is all the sophisticated jet engines and high horsepower or horizontally opposed engines. And a good all-round engine is a rare breed today.
Sure is. Okay, we need, let's put the gear down.
Okay, the gear is coming down. We're under 170 miles an hour, so that meets that requirement. Gear is coming down.
Three in the green.
Green, I got a wheel and it's dry.
I got a wheel.
Okay, standing by on the flaps.
Give me quarter flap.
Quarter flaps coming.
Okay, Bill, I'm going to shoot for VMC 145 until long final. And then your recommendation is 120 over the fence.
Yeah, you want to be a little careful there when you pull a power off that you want to be pretty close to the ground, because what happens, the airplane will want to settle in on you because if air stops going across the top of the wing there.
Okay.
And then it doesn't make very good landings in that case.
Understand.
I got 2 bogeys at 10 o'clock, no factor.
All right. Okay, Billy, can I slow down to about 120 now?
You certainly can. We want to cross that fence at 120.
Full flap.
Full flap coming down.
There's 120. And I'll hold 120 all the way down.
Just remember, flare it first and then pull the power off.
Roger.
There you go, Jess. Absolutely perfect. Grease job, Jeffrey.
Okay, what do you say? Let's get the windows open and get cool. That sounds like wonderful.
We'll use God's air conditioning. How's that?
Okay, now we want to do the post-lining checklist.
Oh.
And I'll let you call those off and you can move the switches.
Alrighty, that'll have your attention totally on driving the airplane on the ground. I should say taxi.
Roger that.
Okay, the boost pump switches are coming off. And the propeller battery power full increase.
And the flaps are coming up.
Cow flaps are open on the right and left engines, and they're going to neutral. The flaps are up and neutral. And I'll shut the inverter switch off.
Okay. Okay, is the post-lining checklist complete?
It's complete.
Okay.
Well, you know, Jeff, in this airplane with the single engine capabilities that it has, sometimes it just won't perform because of density, altitude, and gross weight. And being 145 is your minimum speed in this. If you can't attain it, you can't climb. There's only one other thing to do, and that's to belly this thing in. And try to pick the spot where you're going to put it versus going in under control. You may as well go in under control, pick a nice soft field or some nice trees you can set it on top of, and you'll come out of it as a survivor. You know, there's something that's sexy about these round motors as they snap, crackle, and pop. You know, it's
I don't know what it is, but it gets to you, doesn't it?
it certainly doesn't. It smell. You know, it's got an odor about it that it just pumps the adrenaline up.
It's a burnt oil smell, I guess, and it's just it's intoxicating.
We're down to the parking and securing checklist.
Okay, I'm going to slow down a little bit here so I don't go across these furrows like a million miles an hour.
And we get to feel like helicopter pilots.
That's right.
Okay, 1,500 RPM for 30 seconds because we want to scavenge the pumps, clean out the plugs. Okay. And then you'll bring them back to 1,000 RPM. We're going to cut the right engine first, so then we'll check to see if the left hydraulic pump is working. Okay, down to 1,000. Back to 1,000. There's 1,000 RPM. Here comes the right one. Now I'm going to kick a little flap out here. Okay, I'm going to bring them back up again. And the hydraulic pump on the left engine is working. Here comes the mixture control to idle cutoff. And the flaps are up and they are neutral.
Okay, post.
Okay, we also check the suction on that. We'll shut all switches off the mags.
Okay, master and both mags.
All right. Battery switch and the radios.
Okay.
And we'll lock the controls.
Okay, locking the controls.
they're beautiful to look at. I guess that adds some credence to the adage that if an airplane looks right, it flies right. I've found no better multi-engine cockpit than this one, particularly due to the few switches and controls necessary to fly the aircraft safely. The Mitchell does, or at least tries to do, just about anything demanded of her without complaint, a trait that is probably her most endearing and her most dangerous. Pilots tend to become complacent, taking things for granted. Then they become lax. The 25 flies so well, it makes the pilot think he is, in wartime terms, a real hot rock. Almost all the accidents I can recall involving B-25s have been traced back to pilot complacency. Rusty single-engine drills, poor stall recovery technique, not having the emergency systems charged, tending to land in extreme crosswinds, flying on questionable engines, discarding the 90-degree bank limit, hard maneuvering. In most of those cases, the crew walked away virtually unhurt, but the poor 25 had to be rebuilt. The B-25 is an ex-military bomber, and it should be flown like one. That's where the real challenge is, and the fun.